Hello, I'm Deborah Malone, founder of The Internationalist and host of Internationalist Marketing TV. Today's guest is Costas Papaikonomou. He is a product innovation veteran, an entrepreneur, contrarian thinker, and also known as the grumpy innovator. Costas, what a wonderful pleasure to talk with you today. You're everything from an innovator to a grumpy innovator to a consultant to a marketing guru. So I'm not sure where the conversation will take us, but I have a feeling it'll be in some interesting places. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Deborah, for having me on. Really looking
Well,
forward to this. Yeah.
it's a great joy. It's a great joy. Now, I've given away a little bit of it, but let me just open with just a kind of a framing question. You've spent decades, literally decades, in what you call the birth chambers of innovation, yet you describe yourself as grumpy. What broke your optimism first, the ideas, the systems, or the people? Or a little of both, a
Uh,
little of all.
uh, uh, I guess the realizing that it's not always the best ideas that win. The ideas do get to launch. The good ideas survive, but if the wrong ideas get launched, then you know they won't survive. And I hadn't realized how dramatic that can be when I sort of first came into the, let's say, the world of true mass market innovation. I came in as an engineer. I'd done very much sort of business to business engineering in the sense of machinery for manufacturing, for uh, basically the reality of working with these multinationals where there are so many, say, powers at work that are basically need to be aligned in order for the right idea to work its way all the way through. You realize all the hidden agenda start playing a role. And I think a handicap I also hadn't realized that exists in the world of mass market or consumer goods innovation is usually in the hands of what I would call tourists, people who are not necessarily on the brand for very long, people who don't necessarily know the market very well, and they are very dependent on sort of the information they are fed to make decisions, which might not always be the right ones. And this is different from, let's say, at the time, the more sort of small, medium enterprise environment I came from, where everyone knows their customers, markets inside out, and they spend decades within, let's say, one particular domain. And this is just different in these big corporations where people move around a lot. So no wonder not always the best decisions are made. But it's frustrating. It made me quite grumpy at the beginning.
No, I can certainly understand that. And obviously, there are differences between B2B and B2C, even though we say that each is learning from the other. But you said something very interesting at the opening, that not always the best ideas get to survive, and some of the good ones actually die early. And it seems, as you say, whether it's the silos or people changing roles or the tourists
Mhm.
involved. I mean, is it politics? Is it process? Is it just fear? Is it even possible to say?
Um, well, I guess ideas need sponsors in these corporate environments, and I think sponsorship of an idea isn't necessarily there's not necessarily a correct correlation with the quality of the idea. It just feels like the right thing to the group of people who are responsible for pushing it forward. Um, I'm not sure there's much to do about that if the group of people isn't free to operate as much as basically I can as an outsider or even as an entrepreneur. The reality is for a large corporation, it is about risk management. It's making sure not that the wrong ideas don't progress. That's also funny. I mean, the higher you go into an organization, the more people are rewarded for not killing an idea versus pushing the right one forward. So it's risk management. I think it is also, you could make a case it's better to not launch more often than it is to launch for the simple reason of the cost and the risk involved.
You make a good point. I used to talk about you can't get an idea through, particularly in a global marketplace, if you don't have a champion, which
Hmm.
sounds very much like your definition of what a
Yeah,
sponsor is. And you kind of need that combination of people and ideas, like the old record with a side A and a side B,
yeah.
to get things through. But you go ahead, please. Yeah.
Just maybe if I can add, maybe sorry, I just realized, can I add one thing there, which is there is, I think there, what I've observed again as a relative outsider working with all these multinationals, there's probably two systems. One is the system that is created to have ideas come into existence and then nudge them through all these stages of development through to a launch point. That's the official system. I would say over the years, I've probably met a dozen, maybe 15 people who I would call them the rebels inside these multinationals who actually manage to get their product idea or their launch idea to go around the system and still make it to the end. And these would almost, without exceptions, be also the high quality ideas where you're less dependent on luck of the right one passing through. And I mean, what this expresses, I guess, is how dependent it is on particular people involved, the champions, as you might call them. But in this case, I would really call them rebels, people who are purposely going around the system for what they know is right, and they're also not too bothered, you could say, by the risk it might give them from a career point of view. So they're a little different. But those would be the two systems I would see surviving side by side, just as an outsider peeking in.
Interesting you say that because so many corporations are talking about bringing a startup mentality into the
Hmm.
organization, and I wonder if these rebels come from within the
Hmm.
corporation and it's just innate for them to drive something forward, or if they were people who were brought in just to have that startup mentality. I mean, you hear a lot of this language, but corporations have to have structure. It
Yeah,
is fascinating when you come to something as intangible, as ideas.
true. But the people that come to mind would all have been internal people. Let's put it, not coming from the outside. And it's, if anything, it's they know the system so well, they know how to play them. Whereas an outsider can very quickly just get lost in not knowing who to sort of, um, uh, it's almost like who you're talking about, manipulating, let's say, the decision makers in the room, such that they work in your favor rather than whatever they are doing, trying to follow a procedure.
It's very much related to that. You ask quite a haunting question,
Hmm.
and that is why are obvious opportunities so often ignored? What's the most kind of obvious in hindsight miss that you've seen?
Project-wise, oh man, there are so many. There was one which frustrated me deeply, which was working with Beiersdorf, a big German, say,
Mhm.
conglomerate with all kinds of personal care products in particular, Nivea being their most sort of well-known brand across the globe. We did a piece of work with them probably around 2015 with let's say an early version of what you would now call AI, which we built. It was basically an analytics tool with which we could scrape literally tens of thousands of reviews online to just figure out what's frustrating people when using their products. We were working on a deodorant brand called Black and White, which was all about being invisible after use, so no staining. And what we discovered was absolutely no one cared about the transparent nature, like literally zero. And we went across the whole planet because it's a global brand for them. But what we did found was real excitement around the fact that that particular brand, not only was it invisible, but it had almost no fragrance. It basically canceled out bad odors, but it had no strong fragrance of its own, which meant you can very easily sort of use your own, let's say, cologne or basically fragrancing to top it up. That's what people loved of the product. And we had like huge evidence that this was the case. And in a way, it was a lucky shot because that as a topic, almost like being invisible not only to the eyes, but also invisible to the nose, you can imagine that's something you can build on from a, let's say, a brand point of view. So we built a number of fantastic concepts and propositions on this idea. And then it was shot down in the higher echelons of the organization, who just insisted on, you know what, we're now promising 48 hours protection. Let's go to 72. And that's what they launched. And of course, didn't make a dent in any way into their performance. So there is, again, it's one of many. Well, I mean, we did over 2,000 projects in the course of 10 years. So this it was just one of the many, many, many examples of where there is some tremendous opportunity here to really give, let's say, a fresh lease of life almost to a brand which was plodding along, but then the system around it, which of course is a group of people who have a lot invested in this, cannot risk accidentally taking a wrong turn and would rather just continue on, let's say, the age-old perceived truths, in this case of a deodorant category. Just say it'll last longer. Well, it's a shame.
Interesting. Yeah, it is a shame because those two things would matter tremendously to me,
Hmm.
in the number of black dresses that you have soiled or what, or
Yeah,
and et cetera, et
yeah,
cetera. But and the fragrance layering as well. And I mean, I think there's now other people in the category that are doing it. But the other thing that sometimes happens is, particularly with something new, a new promise, is that consumers don't always realize they need it
of
until it
course.
exists. And the other thing that happens with brands, which I find quite fascinating, is sometimes you create something and then there's create something for a particular purpose. Like I heard the head of innovation at Ford speak a number of years ago, and she talked about how part of the rationale, and this is a complicated rationale, but part of the rationale for doing backup cameras in cars was because the aging population sometimes had a little trouble turning their neck around,
Mm,
to clearly see in the rearview mirror, and this was an enhancement. And little did they know that the people who seemed to love the cameras most were younger people who didn't drive quite as much, and they really saw it as a wonderful tool. So sometimes you just don't know.
yeah.
You just don't know what direction things will go in.
Convenience is a very safe path to go down. And something like a rear view camera is total sort of convenience delivered in that setting. Um, it actually reminds me of one of the first projects we did way back when we started the agency was on motor oil. And the realization in this case that the Shell team in the US, and the Shell in the US owns Jiffy Lube, they own Pennzoil, they own Quaker State, all these say domestic huge brands in motor oil. And you would wonder, okay, well, how do you innovate in motor oil? Which is like a topic it's on no one's sort of awareness chart at any moment in time. What they found was, just looking at the data, was that half of their retail sales, this sounds obvious in hindsight, half of their retail sales was to women. Whereas this team was all gearheads, blokes, guys, talking about muscle cars and performance. And this project kind of revealed that if you would put like a focus group of men together and you have them talk about motor oil and an engine, and you compare that to what happens when you put a group of women together and you have them talk about motor oil and an engine, interesting what is revealed. So the women will just be completely open, the fact that they typically don't know how an engine works or what motor oil does. Men, you can listen to them for an hour sounding intelligence, and then you realize they don't really know either. So it is basically a general problem you need to resolve. And in this case, it led to something really simple. Is we just changed the wording on pack. We went from claims like, let's say, 10W40 and 10W30, all these sort of mechanical technical claims, to high mileage vehicle oil, break-in oil, those kinds of terms. And of course, that's better for everyone, not just the people you're seemingly focusing this on. So convenience is always a safe path. I mean, easier is better by definition.
The examples are always so wonderful because they bring things to light so much in such a more compelling way, and ways that we can actually see
Mm.
it and kind of just say, oh yeah, like why didn't I think of that? Well,
Yeah, exactly.
I think that maybe it's now time to turn to your latest book, The Disruption Fallacy. And you argue that progress comes more from evolution than, dare I
Mhm.
say, revolution or disruption. That's almost heretical in today's business culture. So,
Yeah.
what are we all getting wrong about progress?
Okay, that's a big question. But to go straight to the point, I think innovation, where of course disruption falls within, it has become too much of a destination in itself, rather than realizing what it really is, which is a business tool. There needs to be a business objective that to which the answer is let's innovate. Disruption has is over the years become sort of a misunderstood reason to innovate, even though it's a form of innovating. There is this assumption that if you don't do something dramatic, it won't be noticed, which is simply not true. A lot of the innovation, let's say ownership in large organizations, now sits with marketing, almost universally, which is not typically where you would find the STEM educated people. You would find there people with communications degrees or people who are not necessarily very close to how things are made. And and I'm making a crass generalization here, but it's roughly right, which is when people think of standing out, they think about a new, say, manifestation of the product. It looks different. It basically it stands out on shelf, literally. It has a different appearance. When actually, if you look at genuine disruptions over the years, first of all, they actually solve a problem and they work because the category had some defects that needed to be overcome, or basically gaps. Um, and very often they are not dramatic, let's say, new physical manifestations for the simple reason these are incredibly expensive things to do. If you would look and this is my, let's say, experience of, what is it, 20, almost 30 years, is the moment you really start looking at innovation as a tool rather than just something of a change for change's sake, an interesting mix surfaces. There is two-thirds, maybe three-quarters of your effort should just be in keeping the existing portfolio up to date. Small changes, small tweaks. Whatever the flavor of the day is, you make sure that you can deliver to it. Then you could say where the smart people on the team should be working on and the ones who are the creatives is not about disrupting the category. I mean, why would you even disrupt the category you're now making money in? That's like a stupid thing to do. Go disrupt someone else's category. What you're looking for is to grow what you have, either grow the market share you have or to grow beyond the markets you're in. That's, you could say, where it's really worthwhile putting effort in not just getting to the right insights, but investing in manufacturing, getting to things that are, you could say, suitable to attract a whole new group of consumers, a group of customers into your franchise. Disruption literally means breaking. So when is it worth breaking something? Well, I would say when your back is against the wall, when there is no other choice. And if anything, it's a sign of failure if that becomes the objective, because you've simply failed to keep your portfolio up to date in the right way or to continue growing in the right way by making the somewhat more dramatic changes to what you have. So I think it's also a culturally, it has come into our language almost through probably the world of big tech, where everything is about dramatic, let's say, steps and step changes versus what was before. The reality in my world, though, of consumer goods, of physical products, those massive step changes simply don't exist in the form that are presented in by big tech. To give you maybe one example of what was a genuine disruption than at what it looks like in non-big tech world. We did a piece of work, it's now 10 years ago, with a cough syrup producer called Omega Pharma. They're now part of Perrigo, big family business. And their question to us at the time as an agency was to help us disrupt the UK market. They were not in the UK, or at least they were not really present in the UK with their cough syrups. So they knew something dramatic needed to be done to sort of get some presence on shelf. So that's a legitimate business question that asks for disruption. It's not just saying, hey, what do we do next year? Oh, let's disrupt. No, they had a big objective. And what we found, to cut the long story short, was there's a problem with cough syrups. And you might, if you imagine what the shelf looks like, there's a product for a sticky cough, a dry cough, a wet cough, whatever cough. There's all these products on shelf. You don't know what to pick. And the insight was, well, it's not just because you don't know what to pick, it's because you don't know what kind of cough you have. So the revolution we created was one product, which was literally, it was called Bronco Stop, one syrup for all coughs. And that's what disruption looks like on shelf in this case, because they basically just took a strong formulation and said, just take this one and you'll be okay. But just imagine the bravery you need to then literally go to onto shelf with only one product rather than eight, but knowing this is actually a small problem that is true for many people, which means, well, actually what it meant in practice was they took more than 10% of the market in one cough season, which of course is incredible. That's a disruption. But it's again, it's a syrup and it's a lozenge and it looks like every other product on the shelf, but it has a dramatic new benefit it can deliver to the market. So disruption, I think businesses would already be much more successful in the bigger innovations if they would realize it's not about how the product manifestation looks, it's what it physically is, but what problem it solves. And the bigger the problem, the bigger the behavior change you will attract from it or through it, the bigger the disruption in market. Sorry, this is a very long answer to your question, Deborah, but I
It's
filled a whole
not big.
book about this.
Well, no, but
Yeah.
you see what you've just proven is that that is disruption because they were not in the UK market.
Hmm.
And that was their way of breaking through, and it makes a lot of sense. I thought that you were going to say that they would create some kind of an indicator to let you know what kind of cough that you did have, but it doesn't matter. This was even a more
Yeah.
important breakthrough.
So the example you give, so indeed, let's create an app and you cough into the app and it tells you what kind of cough you have. That sounds great as a solution. And it's actually one of the ideas that came through. The other was like doing lots on shelf navigation. But this is a cough and cold syrups company. So the solution they create has to be a cough and cold syrup. And in my world, end of story. Because otherwise you get distracted into these areas you're not good at. You're going to have to rely on outside partners to create for you. They are not an app company, so they will never create a great app. See, so there's a simple logic actually, which is stick to what you know, and respect what you have, because then you could say you can really leverage actual knowledge, actual production capabilities, actual things. You know what you're doing, but you do need the very strong insight at the front end telling you where to go. Um,
No,
without
I entirely agree, and I
the
think that
insight, you're
is,
lost. Yeah,
and that's a
yeah.
very easy way for people to go awry. And I think not to spend too much time on this, but probably the reason that there's so many
Hmm.
different facings of one brand's many cold solutions is because that's
Hmm.
the way that they saw growth. Well, let's add another
Yeah,
one, for this season's.
exactly. Yeah.
But I also you said something early in the answer about language, and I think one of the things that happens in business, and not that doesn't happen in all of society, but particularly in business and particularly marketing, which is the area I know best about business, that people latch on to certain words and then suddenly those words move away from the original meaning or the
Hmm.
original intention that they were to have. I mean, one that comes to mind is purpose.
Hmm.
It's not that purpose has gone away. It's just that the situations to which we have to react to purposeful decision making are changing all the time in a crazy geopolitical world. Not to
Hmm.
go. I mean, I wish there were a better word for that, and I think that might mean mean meaning or trust or authenticity, whatever it might be. But disruption and innovation could be two of those words that
Hmm.
might mean different things to different people. So I'm curious, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but how would you very simply define innovation or disruption? And I'm curious if you're defining it in terms of your perspective or in the
Hmm.
perspective of what your clients think it is.
Yeah. Well, innovation I don't think it's very complicated. It is the business process of updating one's portfolio of products or services to take to market. That's what innovation is. You had one set of services, one set of products, and after the innovation process, it has been updated in some form to better fit what that market is asking for, and that helps you as a business attract customers. I'm a firm believer that the sole purpose of a business is to attract customers. There is no other reason for existing. And disruption is just on that spectrum of how dramatic you can choose to update that portfolio. And again, I would argue that the majority of your resources should be spent on just minor updates to just stay up to date and to stay relevant. And this might be incredibly opportunistic. You could make a case that a lot of these small changes you see appear, at least on supermarket shelves, are not for the consumer, but they are just to keep the retail customer engaged and say, "Hey, we have something new news here, and it's another flavor change." And that's fine because that's basically the machine you are operating in, making sure that your machine just runs a little sort of smoother than any of the competitors. Disruption sits at the tail end of the spectrum, which is it's something I guess you should always have in your back pocket. If it needs to be, you need to know roughly where is the dramatic change going to be required. But again, you're looking at percentages of your R&D budget, of your marketing budget, not big chunks. That would just be disaster. Um, it attracts a completely and again, it's something I try to explain in the book. The type of people working on those, let's say, three tiers of innovation, like the incremental stuff, just making sure it's up to date, etc. Very different group of people, because that's also usually within one function you can do that. The functions don't even need to know from each other what parts they're updating. One's working on the price position, the other's working on the actual cost of goods. It could be, but then when you move into grow, when you're looking to attract new customers, it becomes like this cross-functional thing, becomes of taking that sort of core of what you are good at as a business to a new audience. It's dramatic, or not dramatic, but that's like that requires collaboration. When you look at disruption, when the house is on fire, that is not a collaborative process you're looking for. You're looking for a tyrannical process almost with one or two strong leaders who are just going to say, this is what it's going to be. Because if we don't solve this within 6 months or a year, the ship sinks. Very different kind of leadership style, which works well in, let's say, startups, which are typically run by almost like evangelist believers in the one and only idea. And they are the one and only ones who know the truth, and they will lead the business to wherever it needs to go. Yeah, but that's like a tiny little section. That's not what the average multinational runs on. It would destroy them.
I'm just curious, and we can't have a conversation today without having a conversation about AI. And, obviously, we're entering an era when AI can generate some ideas pretty much instantly, of course,
Yeah,
depending on the input and so on and so forth. In your mind, does this accelerate innovation or just the illusion of it?
that's a very profound question, and I have an answer to that, an opinion, I should say, which is what I hope is of those three tiers I just laid out, incremental, growth, and disruption, that AI is used to make the incremental bit way more efficient because that's not a hard bit. That is just literally keeping up with the Joneses, claims updates, flavor changes, etc. So that the human brain power, where actual creativity is required, is really focused on the growth element because that's where you need not just, let's say, the quality of thinking in the proposition that you're developing. You also need the human side of it, as we talked about at the beginning, navigating a project through an organization and making sure that it launches in the right way. These are business decisions you're making. Incremental updates for just like new claims on pack, new colors, new flavors, with the help of AI, that actually, if you imagine a good AI tool, which is literally honed to whatever type of business or category you're in, with like junior and relatively young people coming into that organization, that's like magic. It's almost like you get the energy of the young person and you get the smarts of the AI to do stuff in a relatively safe environment. Once you could say, once these people start understanding how their organization works, how you get the complex sort of, uh, what is it, multifunctional stuff to progress through an organization, that's when you get to the meaty stuff of growth innovation. And yeah, so I hope it lands. I also already see some dark sides, which is particularly on the side of market research, where AI is being used to create fake personas, which I personally see as another excuse for a marketing team not to have to talk to actual people. And this sort of, I think market research is in a crisis and has been in a crisis for about a decade now. And AI is not the solution there, but that's maybe a different topic. Unless you want to dive into that rabbit hole.
It is, yeah, it is a rabbit hole, and maybe that will be our next conversation, because I do think that is an important conversation to have, because, the further away you get from the human being,
Yeah.
even though a lot of consumers may not know what they want, they just might know what they don't want, or
Mhm.
don't like, or wish were better, but it doesn't, it's the old Henry Ford analogy, people didn't know they needed a car, they wanted a faster horse,
Exactly. Yeah.
that sort of thing. Well, we have had a lot of philosophical conversations and a lot of long answers. So I'm now going
Sorry.
to, no, it's great. I'm going to go through just a couple of quick questions, and just see what you think, as kind of a short answer, as we end this. And then I think we now know what our next conversation will be
Yeah.
about. It will be about the rabbit hole of market research, which I'm quite fascinated by. But okay, what is the most overrated innovation buzzword?
Well, we already talked about disruption, so let me
Yeah.
add to that AI, because that is
Okay.
being wedged into everything right now, even when it's completely inappropriate. So that would be my number two. Yeah.
All right. So that's one. Okay. One thing every CMO should stop doing immediately.
Oh, the fewer, bigger, better. Stop aiming for that. It's death. They never
All
work.
right.
I've never seen such a program lead to an actual big idea.
So you call that fewer, bigger, better?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many of our old clients had a shade of the.
There's also faster, cheaper. There's another threesome like that. Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
and I'm sure it's even worse.
Yeah. Okay. What's the best innovation you've seen that no one ever talks about?
Well, actually, for me personally, it's printing on demand.
Uh,
I love that. I can now publish books by the press of a button. That was impossible. I tried doing it first 10 years ago. It was a nightmare. Now it really is as easy as just sending a file to a printer. It's incredible.
Well, on that note, then, I will just end it by saying you've got a series of fascinating books, particularly to anyone within the marketing department, or whether they're in general business or startups, or whatever it might be, that does make you smile, even though you're often grumpy. But also, certainly, the disruption fallacy, I think, is one to keep, to really spend some time with, because it does change the way you think about, not only innovation, but just the success of business. So it's been a pleasure to talk to you today, and I actually look
Thank you,
forward
Deborah.
now to our next conversation.
Yes, the rabbit hole of market research, which is dark.
Right. The okay, we'll have to put that down, the rabbit hole of market research. Okay. And that'll probably be a long conversation, since it sounds like it's been 10 years in coming. So,
Mhm.
okay. A pleasure, Costas. Good to talk to you, and talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
The Internationalist focuses on the continual reinvention of marketing by highlighting inspirational marketers around the world and their ideas as they move the industry forward. Internationalist Marketing TV shares these perspectives through interviews and personal stories. Thanks so much for watching. If you find this kind of content helpful, please click like or subscribe. Again, thanks so much.